this week we're going to focus on anxiety and finding out a little bit more information about it. So I'm going to ask Sean a few questions so we can get to know it a little better and understand it. So Sean, generally speaking, what is anxiety? What would you say? How would you describe it?
Well, I would say, anxiety first and foremost is an emotion that we all feel, but some of us feel it a little bit more than others, and sometimes we feel it a little bit more than others at certain times in our life.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with anxiety, though, is that it really creates an illusion that there is some impending danger or threat, and that threat sometimes is rational. If I don't do well in this presentation today, it's really going to hurt my job performance. So I might get a little anxious or worried about that.
Yeah.
But most of the time, the threat is really irrational. Like, if I don't do well in this presentation today, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to end up homeless. So when it comes to anxiety disorders, that's some of the irrationality that we see. We all do this kind of irrational, anxious thinking all the time. It really influences how anxious we feel, how we react to that feeling. So I encourage people to think about the things that make them anxious.
Yeah.
And be more aware of the kinds of thoughts that come up for them, and really ask yourself, do you need to react to those anxious thoughts? And most of the time we don't.
I feel like I always have to, so it's tough. So I understand.
Yeah, sure.
Now, why does it seem like anxiety rates are rising?
Well, they are rising. There's a few different reasons for that. And one of which is we really have a name for anxiety. Our parents, our grandparents, when you talk to them about feeling anxious, they might say, oh yeah, I get nervous sometimes, or I'm a worrier. But now we have a better understanding of what anxiety is and the criteria that fits into anxiety disorders and things like that. And then certainly our younger people today are far better at talking about mental health, about opening up to people about what they're experiencing. And so anxiety is a big part of that. So I think that's certainly part of it, but I also think that it is ingrained in our lifestyle, stress and anxiety. It's kind of a cliche, but I think the pressure of our busy lives plays a big role. And it's really hard to manage the stress of our hectic day on top of all of that. So, and then finally, this is said a lot, but I think social media plays a big role, especially for our young people. There's a ton of more pressure now on our young folks, and it seems like they are under a microscope. That's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like I myself have to delete those apps for days at a time just to chill out. It's a major difference for sure. Now, some people experience panic attacks and anxiety attacks. What do those feel like exactly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I hear this a lot from clients, or even, students I teach, people I just see. Is this, like, we throw around these terms of panic attack, anxiety attack. So in the psychology world, we really use this term panic attack. And a panic attack is really an episode of intense fear and worry that's accompanied by physical sensations like shortness of breath, hyperventilation, a tightness in the chest, heart palpitations, sweating, chills, hot flashes, trembling, shaking, all those things. So the other difficult thing about a panic attack is often that comes about without any kind of trigger. And that can be really scary. You're kind of sitting in class, or you're driving in your car, or you're sitting at home, and you have this intense, fear. You have all these physiological sensations.
This wave comes over.
Yeah, it's a wave, and it really lasts like 15, 20 minutes, but sometimes it feels a lot longer than that.
I'm sure.
And then the second feature of panic attacks is how we react to it. So some people react with fears or worries like, something's wrong with my health. I'm having a heart attack, I'm going to die. Others react with fears of, so there's something going on in my mind. This doesn't feel right. I think I'm going crazy. Maybe I'm having a nervous breakdown. Yeah. And in both cases, people end up trying to avoid situations that they think brought on the panic attack. But the good news is there's really effective treatments for panic disorder. And part of that is just building a knowledge on what is a panic attack. If there are triggers, what are those triggers?
Yeah,
And that you're not going to die and you're not going to go crazy, but you can just heal from that through help.
that's good to know, because I can say myself firsthand, I've been one to go down that fear route rather than just thinking, okay, I think I'm having a panic attack. What can I do to help it?
Yeah, it's
And
really
things,
scary when you don't know what's going on.
yeah,
And a lot of times we see people who go right to the hospital, the emergency room, when they're having a panic attack because they think maybe this is a heart attack or
I've
something
seen
something
many
similar.
people firsthand. Yeah, I know a handful of people who have gone. It's scary. You don't know what
Yeah,
you don't know exactly if that's what it is, especially if there's not anything directly on your mind at that moment. It's just like comes out of nowhere.
yeah.
Um, Now, can anxiety be cured?
Well, curing anxiety and controlling anxiety are somewhat different things. When I
Yeah,
work with someone who struggles with anxiety, we're not necessarily shooting for some day when they're magically never going to feel anxious again, because that's really a part of us as human beings. Instead, some of the goals that we work towards are developing a better understanding of anxiety, becoming more self-aware so that we know when we're feeling anxious, which is actually kind of a difficult thing to do. And
yeah,
then developing effective coping skills for when anxiety does pop up. So there's a wealth of really accurate information on anxiety and anxiety treatment out there. So if you follow our social media pages, I'll be posting more books and other resources for people to check out.
yeah. That would be super helpful. Which then brings me to, what are some things that people can do to cope with anxiety and how they're when they're feeling anxious?
Yeah, great question, because we all are experiencing this. It's for some of us on a daily basis. So, first and foremost, it's incredibly important to learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. When we get anxious, we feel pressure to do whatever we can to avoid the situation that's making us anxious. But that
True.
only reinforces the anxiety. It's almost like throwing kindling on the anxiety fire. So we need to really challenge ourselves to put ourselves in situations that we know make us anxious and
Yeah.
just sit with that anxious feeling, because it's not going to be permanent, right? It'll be temporary. It'll be uncomfortable, but that's okay. And there's tremendous power in being able to do that. It's also really helpful if you can check in with yourself throughout the day. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Because we tend to hyper focus on how bad we feel when we get anxious, and it
Yeah.
blows it out of proportion for us. And then we're under the assumption like I'm always anxious, when in reality there are many times throughout the day when we feel quite comfortable. There are a ton of strategies and treatments for anxiety that you can learn when you work with a therapist. So if anxiety is a problem for you, find a good therapist that you can connect with.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best advice I can give.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you answering these questions. I'm sure there's a ton more that people would want to ask, but we can always touch on those another time. At least hopefully
Yeah,
this will
yeah.
help cover at least a base for many who are wondering about it and seeing if that's what is happening to them, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And if you are, if you're watching this and you're thinking this applies to me, you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can email me, and we're happy to talk about it more.
Yeah,
So thanks
definitely.
so much for watching this, everybody, and have a
Yes,
great day.
thank you. Yep.